Good morning and happy Friday. So we continue our conversation about state and state management. Three things: figure out our state: physiology, focus/belief, and then the last part is language. And we've been talking about language really this whole time, but let's talk about it specifically. So businesses are great at this stuff. They like to use language to try to make, something that's really horrible and make it not so bad. So like Honeywell became the best at this. As their CEO was completely crashing that company, he would say things like, well, we're trying to right size our crisis proportionate situation. If you add more vowels, as you add more syllables, then it becomes less problematic, right? So, like in World War I, we had shell shock, 2 syllables. And then shell shock in World War II became battle fatigue, 4 syllables. Then in Korea, it became post-traumatic stress. And then in Vietnam, it became post-traumatic stress disorder. We add syllables and it lessens. So the other one that Honeywell did all the time was whenever they would be doing their quarterly reports, and they were just terrible. Their reports were just awful. And their CEO would say, well, that's suboptimal. That report is suboptimal. That's now become a joke. If you watch CNBC, Jim Cramer talks about all that all the time. But we use language all the time to do the opposite. And if you watch media, my favorite is the Weather Channel. Turn on the Weather Channel and wait for a commercial in the Weather Channel, and there'll be some commercial about a storm or something, and they'll use just the most horrifying language. So, it was devastating, it was catastrophic, it was a killer, it was this, it was that, and they're just trying to get somebody to watch, right? How exciting is it to watch the Weather Channel? So, in order to try to grab you, they've got to use this unbelievably dramatic language. And the thing is we do this all the time. We can take something that is unfortunate and a bummer and not the greatest thing ever, but we turn it into this giant thing using language. We say it was catastrophic. We say it was horrible. I remember I was watching a really cool presentation on pollinators by some good friends of mine, pollinators, bees and moths. And they were talking about how there was a setup in South America, I think it was in Chile, where they grew basically all the strawberries that we all eat in the winter. And they had this huge setup in these tents, and in order to pollinate the strawberries, they had to bring in these bees that were not native to the area. And by doing that, there was a wasp that was only in this area, this large wasp, that was probably going to end up being pushed out and was going to become extinct because these bees were taking up all of the food of this wasp. And the person giving the presentation, who's a friend of mine, just stopped and looked at everybody and said, "This is such a tragedy." And I thought to myself, well, okay, this isn't a great thing. We're extincting a species just so everybody can have strawberries in the winter, But is it a tragedy? Is it really the end of the world if this wasp goes away? And can't we grab a couple of these things and take them somewhere else? Can't we put them in some sort of enclosure that we can raise them and put them back when they're done making the strawberries? There's got to be some way to do this. When a bunch of children are dying, I guess I'd kind of consider that a tragedy. The explosion that happened in Beirut the other day, that to me is a tragedy. If a wasp goes away, I don't know if I'd call that so much a tragedy. So, but we use language like that, and we are really good at using it to negatively motivate ourselves. But are we as good at using it to positively motivate ourselves? Do we do just as good a job using language to accentuate the great things? Do you say, when somebody asks you, how are you doing today? Do you routinely say, I'm wonderful, I'm spectacular, I'm amazing? Or do you routinely say, I'm okay? And, if you say that you're great all the time, people don't always necessarily respond the best to that. We've talked about that before, that if you always come in and say, I'm doing great, somebody will, easy for you, as if somebody who's in a positive mood all the time doesn't have problems. They're just changing how they look at these problems. They're able to look at it and say, okay, let's keep this in perspective. The language that we use every day decides how we feel about those events in that day. That's why we say things like, somebody says, I'm breaking down. Are you breaking down or are you breaking through? A little transformation like that will change everything. I mean, a great therapist will use language to completely change your relationship to an event. I did all of these things and I feel terrible about it. I was in this relationship and I cheated on this person and I feel terrible about it. Okay. Have you learned a lesson from that? Yes. Well, then you're not the same person than you were before then, right? Yes. All right. Well, stop beating up the person that you are now because you've already learned that lesson. You're now punishing an innocent person. Language like that can change everything. We lose almost all of our cells in our body every year. And every 3 years, every cell in your body is replaced. So like if you have cancer, the cancer cells are dying and being replaced by new cancer cells. One of the things Ayurvedic medicine has been able to successfully do is have people meditate, and instead of focusing on the cancer and worrying about it growing, focus on the tumor and just allow it to die and let new cells that come not be cancerous. Because the only reason the new cell is cancerous is because of the memory put into it from the other cell. And all you have to do is to tell the new cell, you don't need to follow that memory, be a healthy cell, and the cancer can go away. And they've had people meditate and be able to do that and have cancer leave their body, simply by changing their relationship to those events and to that language. If you, one of the great ways to help somebody who's been sexually assaulted is to tell them every cell in their body is that happened to is gone. And it's true. They've all died and gone away. So the body that happened to has died and is now dust. And this is a new body. That language distinction can completely change their relationship to that event and make them feel completely differently about themselves for the rest of their life. And you can do that with anything at any time. So one of the ways that we do that is, we always look at what's positive, right? We try to look at, how can I look at this and how can it serve me? That's why I love the Tony Robbins phrase, life is happening for me, not to me. That's using language to change our relationship to any event. Take the rest of the day, pay attention to the things that you say on a regular basis. We've all got phrases. We've all got incantations that we say to ourselves all the time. We've all got phrases that we say all the time. Start to become conscious about that, because most of the time it's unconscious. What is it that you say? What do you say constantly? What is it that you repeat? What is it that you focus on? And start to play with language in a way so that you can start to have it be more positive. One of the things about my job is I see people every day whose lives were changed in a heartbeat by a significant event. And usually that event is a wreck. Sometimes it's a medical issue, sometimes it's something else, but usually for me, it's a wreck. And usually it's a wreck involving an 80,000-pound missile. When a tractor trailer is going down the road at 70 miles an hour, it weighs 80,000 pounds, it's a missile. And whatever it hits, it explodes. And seeing that the ramifications of those things is very effective in terms of keeping life in perspective. So when something happens and it's suboptimal, it's a lot easier for me to look at it and go, okay, that's not the desired result, but I'm not going to look at that and fall to pieces, because I've seen what a real significantly bad event is. And if you have to experience something like that, then suddenly life gets put in perspective. And you know what? If we live long enough, pretty much all of us do. So remember what's important and use language to not only make the bad stuff smaller, learn the lessons, but don't suffer. Remember our rule, suffer for 90 seconds and then forget suffering, because you don't need to suffer any longer in order to learn the lesson. Learn the lesson and move on. But also use language to make the great stuff greater. There's no reason to not take the things that are good and to make them bigger and to put them in front of you and look at them and focus on them and be able to say, this is the part of the stuff that's fantastic and I love it and I'm thankful for it every day. And language really decides how we think about something and what it means. Am I freaking out or am I peeved? Am I upset or is this catastrophic? Is it unfortunate or is it a disaster? And the people who are successful in life in every way, they find ways to manage all of this. They use their physiology, they use their focus, they use their beliefs, and they use their language to manage their state with regards to every event that happens in their life. They're more effective at doing that. Remember, it's not the event that decides how we feel. We decide our relationship to every event that happens. It's our choice. Happiness is a choice. Success is a choice. Failure is a choice. Following your goals is a choice. Not following your goals is a choice. We're not going to be able to control events. We're not going to be able to control the things that happen around us all the time. As much as achievers want to try to do that, we can't. And that's where achievers say, I'm stressed. I'm stressed means I'm afraid because I can't control this event. But what you can control is you can control your response to it. Have a great Friday, everybody. Thank you very much for watching. Tracy, I'll see you in a couple of hours. Jim, I hope you're doing great down in Florida, brother. We miss you. I hope life is grand. And thank you very much for watching. We're all in this together, everybody. Let's take care of each other.